All right. Perfect. I think we have everyone. So as Jeff mentioned, I'm Kelly Hook. I run CS for a startup in San Francisco, does supply chain. If you're new to this community, the way this works is we're going to gather some questions as a group. Ideally, we'd have about 5 questions related to the topic, which is territory planning. After we get those questions, we'll kind of solution those together as a group and try to come up with some actionable items and takeaways. Typically, the Gain, Grow, Retain team also publishes these calls and the lessons learned in a blog post. So I'll be jotting down questions and kind of everything that's happening in the chat, and writing up a brief recap to give back to them. So with that, we mentioned already about the raise hand feature. I'll drop a link in one more time. This is a link on how to raise your hand in Zoom. It's in the chat if you're not familiar, but it's definitely a participatory discussion. So if no one's raising their hand, I may just call on someone. It's not to be cruel. Please don't mind. That happened to me a bunch when I first joined these. All right, so with that, we will move to the topic, which is territory planning today. Now, territory planning, I think, is pretty broad, and if you saw the post Jeff just shared, it encompasses things like the territory assignment and customer segmentation broadly. How is it that you're looking at your ratio of CSMs to customers? What model are you employing? Is it high touch, low touch? Are all of your CSMs working with every single customer? Also, just in general, are you looking at different CSMs for different areas in North America, world? Yeah, any thoughts that anyone has, please raise your hand and I will call on you. And again, we'll try to gather about 4 or 5 questions that you'd like to ask the whole group, and then we'll workshop those together. Anyone have thoughts on this topic? All right, I'm not seeing any hands raised. How about just to kind of curious where everyone is anyone doing territory planning right now for 2021? Or thinking about how you're going to be segmenting your customer? Just raise your hand if you are at all working on 2021 planning. Chat, no, a lot of no's in the chat. Also on the chat, I'm not going to be able to read it as much, assuming that we do get into a good dialogue. So if anyone wants to monitor the chat, raise things that you're seeing that are interesting, that would be awesome. Just feel free to jump in at any time or raise your hand and call it out. David, yes, do you have comments?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and start off the conversation for you, Kelly. So thanks. Yeah, so when I've done territory planning before, I was in a business that had technology plus services. So it was important for us to have some customer facing time, not just on the phone, not just tech touch, not just, we used to use Skype instead of Zoom. I think Zoom's become the big thing. So I think one of the questions people have to ask themselves is, not only for today, but as you think about whatever your new normal is going to be, is there going to be face-to-face customer time that's involved? And how much does that come into play when you look at territory assignments? Do you put your CSM, do you hire a CSM that's close to the customer? Do you put them in your office and have them travel? How do you handle things like that?
And you're looking at it from the time that we're in right now in the world, where people are having to maybe lose CSMs or things are looking a bit different. How are people adjusting and managing territory planning with that in mind?
Exactly. And then, not just planning for now, but planning for the future, right? What do you don't want to hire somebody today and put them in place and then change your model 6 months from now and let that person go and hire somebody else. That's not what this is all about. But really taking into consideration where you are today and where you think you want to be or where you can get to in the future.
Great question. Fantastic. Yeah, so we'll talk about that in just a little bit and see if we can gather any more questions. How about Kathleen? I know you have to have done a lot of this stuff. Can you tell us anything or any questions you think would be interesting for the group around this topic?
Yeah. So I think that the question that I have is, you know, when you're introducing like new team members, so especially if you're in a hyper growth business, like how do you make sure to, you know, like if you are going to be making big sweeping changes, how do you do that? I've seen, and really another question I have is, you know, should it be based on region or should it be based on skill and the product type? For us, in previous roles that I've had, it's really, in consulting work that I've done, it's really varied depending on what the resources are and the product. So I'd love to hear what the group has to say.
Perfect, thank you. Yeah, so yours is really around a little bit about account transitioning. How do you introduce new people? Maybe if it's a new customer and someone also newly joined your team. And then are you basing the planning on skill level or is it just based on area? Fantastic, yeah. Thank you. Was that Benny? Yes.
Yeah. Hey, the first thing that comes to my mind is, you know, what is the new normal? Because many companies look at the year-over-year performance, whether it's by the company as a whole, by territory, what's the expectations, you know, by region, and so forth. And so if I'm going to be graded on my year-over-year performance, and we've got a pandemic, we've got a new normal where people are being concerned about things that we've never had to be concerned about since probably the 1920s. What's the new normal, and how do we measure it, and how do we not get penalized because are rewarded based on some things that have never been dealt with before?
And you mean the new normal, just broadly speaking, like measurement on, maybe you can talk a little bit more about that. Are you saying measurement on your CSMs and how they're achieving success?
Well, a measurement by however a company considers, you know, my compensation or my success. Because when I look at, you know, we're in August of 2020, you know, companies look at the year-over-year performance. So performance from 2029. You know, it may not even be able to compare apples to apples because we're talking about this new environment space that, you know, that I'm being measured on, and say my numbers are different this year than they were last year. There's a huge explanation maybe in hand because, you know, we're dealing with stuff we haven't ever had to deal with before.
Yeah, absolutely.
Does that make sense?
Definitely. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of just what are people thinking of for success right now and how have things changed?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I have some thoughts on that as well. By the way, if people want to raise your hand, you just go down to the participants button at the bottom of Zoom here. And if you click on that, you should see a raise hand feature. So if that happens, it pushes you to the top of the gallery view here, and then I can more easily see you. Laura. Hey, Laura.
Hi,
yes.
Kelly.
You're not using the raise hand feature either. I'm worried I'm going to miss someone.
My question is around updating territory planning. We are a company that's product launched in November. We grew as a team to 6 people. And so for a small company, as you grow to more people and as you have larger accounts come into the fold, you start shifting who's assigned and how territory planning happens. And that's what our company's been going through.
Fantastic. Thanks. And yours,
and it looks like there was a good question in here, Kelly, about does geography matter anymore, just time zones?
Thank you. And I'm curious, Laura, because you consider your team a small team, but you're part of a larger company. So I'd be curious to know if that larger organization has to influence the way you plan, or you operate as a kind of a startup. That's an interesting
point. We, just for everyone's knowledge, I work for SoftBank Robotics and we're owned by SoftBank Group. So we're a global company, but our US operations are set up, we're a team of 6 CSMs. So we're set up as a startup more here in the US. And so we are only focused on US clients in the way we're structured.
Got it. Okay, thank you. Also, I am so sorry. I've been missing. People are using the raise hand feature. Thank you, Amanda. I was looking at it in the wrong way. So people are using it. Thank you. Perfect. Thanks, Laura. Karthik, can you share your thoughts on this topic?
So Kelly, my question is more about, when it comes to territory management and having CSMs in different territories, how do you maintain consistency of service or, consistency of relationship with different accounts in different territories?
So maintaining consistency, no matter, I mean, is this related to CSM transitions as well, or you just mean across different models and different CSMs and ratios of customers? How do you maintain a consistent experience no matter what?
Yeah, I'm talking about the latter one.
Okay. Okay, fantastic. Looks like we've got 3 more, so we'll go through those and then probably should get to answering these. John Hamilton.
Hi, good morning. So I guess my question would be, at what point does geographical alignment become important or critical based on segmentation? And when I say that, I mean, if you've got micro or small business or even mid-market accounts, is it really important for them to be in the same time zone? But if you have an enterprise client, then, in my mind, it makes sense at a minimum to have the same time zone, but even geographically closer where they can go on site. And obviously with COVID, that's not really happening, but at some point we're going to work through that. And you'll probably want your CSM supporting large enterprise clients able to get there in front of your clients and driving, whether it's EDRs or any kind of joint planning reviews, et cetera, et cetera.
Got it. So you're, maybe make sure I understand your question there. You said, when is geography becoming important? And in particular, does it matter if your CSMs are on the same time zone and can travel to your customer? Probably
exactly.
To large enterprise accounts.
On that be? I think it's pretty obvious if you got micro accounts, it's not scalable to have CSMs necessarily in the same time zones or same city or, like that. But, you only have so many enterprise clients or top 5 clients. And, in my mind, that's when it becomes a little bit more important.
Absolutely. Perfect. Okay, John Hamilton, let's end with your question. Sorry, me. Bob Beard. Sorry, Bob. Sorry, John.
Yeah, so kind of taking a little bit different look than John. I think in a way, especially because of COVID, you might be able to look less at time zones and geography. And it depends on the business, but I know in some of the accounts or businesses I've been with, it was really valuable to align them via vertical. And so, I had accounts across time zones, but I was able to bring them together in a way. And I think you can learn a lot more when you start to have almost a community that's formed based on things that are, a lot of similarities in their businesses.
Yeah, and I think that gets back to segmentation. There's no right or wrong answer. You could do it by vertical, you could do it by MRR, AAR. You could slice and dice a lot of different ways.
Right.
So let's just start the discussion here, since you guys are already talking about it. It seems like two points here between John and Bob, where on the one hand, COVID might provide an opportunity for us to worry a little bit less about geography, less about time zones. It might be time box. Maybe it's only 1.5 years that will be the case. And then what would happen on the other side of that? Or maybe it could always be the case. Maybe, Bob, if you want to explain your position a little bit more.
Well, I just think about, I had healthcare accounts, and it really seemed to help to learn more about the business as I brought them together, and they began to share struggles and ideas. And I think they saw me differently, more, as a true consultant, and it just opened up a lot more dialogue. So I was able to learn a lot more about the account and find ways that perhaps we can deliver more value.
And in that case, are you talking about, you actually introduced the customers to each other as well? You were creating a community there.
Yeah, in my case, it was the customer conference gave me an opportunity to do that. So I went ahead and kind of did this healthcare forum, if you will, and had some speakers, as well as, again, inviting all of my healthcare accounts. But yeah, it doesn't have to have that as a catalyst either.
How about anyone else sharing your experience on how you feel about geography right now and segmenting your customers and your CSMs based on region? Joe Mitchell.
Yeah, hey, thanks for having me be part of this day. So I'm with a company called MuleSoft, part of Salesforce. The sales team is in a regional model and a vertical model. My success team, I think there's about 18. We cover the East, over 300 customers. We're in the regional model, obviously, partially trying to get into the vertical model. And just 2 quick points. What I've found as we scaled pretty rapidly is trying to align as best. So our go-to-market is obviously the AE, solutions engineer, et cetera. Trying to align my team as best in line with their model as possible seems to create a lot of efficiencies. So when I was initially inherited the team, and it was maybe 10, 12 CSMs per AE, one CSM, one AE could have 10 or 12 different CSMs. That caused a lot of inefficiency across the gamut. So we're trying to think about aligning with our primary company go-to-market, which is regional and vertical, and then AE driven. And I'm trying to introduce some synergies there, in addition to readiness to scale and how much they spend. So that was one of the ways we've been thinking about it. So I'm not sure if that answers the question, but I thought it would be potentially valuable to share that we're kind of looking internally before we think about geo or vertical. We're thinking about our own go-to-market on the sales side.
In what way has the model changed from having previously one AE had several CSMs? What does that model look like now?
So I've been able to get, I call it wolf packs. So we're primarily incentivized for expanding customers, obviously retention, but our primary compensation and motivation is on expansion. So when I've been able to align an AE to one CSM, it drives a lot of efficiencies on where they want to go and hunt and how they prioritize that, where they want to spend their time. Versus historically, it was like an AE asking someone on my team to go do a workshop here or a workshop there, and then the CSM had to say, I'm already going here with this AE and over here with this other AE and over here with this other AE. As I was able to radically reduce the number of CSAE pairings, it introduced a lot of efficiencies on the calendar, on the interactions, on Slack, across how we team. So I've prioritized internal teaming efficiency, and I think that's had a really big, better impact on our results and the customer experience.
That's really interesting. Alex Wolpa, do you have something to add to this?
Yeah, thanks for letting me be a part of this as well. Joe, this is a question for you. How has that changed now, though, with the limited ability to travel? It's kind of a round robin where we work at, where an opportunity comes in through the door, and then post onboarding, it just kind of gets thrown to whoever's next up, essentially. But I'm interested because we're starting to grow pretty rapidly as well, but our CS team doesn't have any projections to get much bigger. So as we start to get bigger client books, I'm trying to figure out the best way to segment that, right? We kind of have some tiering models based on ARR, but I'm interested to see, what that partnership looks like between your AEs and the CSMs now that you guys aren't necessarily traveling as much.
Yeah, it's a good question. Without the travel, besides what used to be a 30-second to 5-minute interaction in passing is now a 30-minute calendar invite, which destroyed everybody's calendars. We finally figured that out. It took 4 or 5 months. I think the wolf pack model, it's still just holding true that it allows the teams to be more aligned on a smaller set of customers that they work together. And a lot of our interactions have gone purely virtual. Our marketing team was able to pivot really quickly, even to our national level marketing events. So I don't know if I'm answering your question correctly, but what we used to go on site and do, we're doing now just fully remote. So the teaming model has continued to work, for lack of a better word. And then the only thing I would add, and I think this is where you were going, and again, it took a long time. The CS team scales much in a lagging way than behind sales. But in this model, I find it much more efficient for me to assign new customers that AEs land to a CS. I was in a very ad hoc world before, like, who has time? Raise your hand. And that just only further fragmented the model. It made it madness. And then it allows an AE who's going after a new prospect, if they want to bring in what I think we would all call highly differentiated customer success investment that we're making in customers, it allows that AE instead of now reaching to me and say, hey, Joe, can you run the CS commercial from MuleSoft to this prospect? They have their little wolf pack of 1 or 2 CS, or 1 in this case, that they always work with. And they can just ask that person, even though we don't get paid on the land, they can ask that person to talk to the prospect and let them know how we're going to onboard them and drive adoption and drive utilization, et cetera. So I shared that because I thought that's where you're going, but that's another benefit of having fewer CS to fewer AE.
I think that makes a lot of sense. It does tend to feel like our AEs are segmented by region and vertical. I think someone else mentioned that earlier, but it would allow us to kind of focus in on that kind of customer segmentation.
Yeah,
I think this is a good segue to David's question, and also Benny, your question about kind of what does the new normal look like for everyone, and how are people measuring success right now among CSMs, which maybe would ultimately dictate how you'd be dividing them up among customer accounts. Does anyone have thoughts or lessons learned that you'd be able to share around how your success metrics have changed over the past 6-7 months? Ben.
Sure. So in our company, the way we handle it, I mean, we're obviously very understanding of the changing temperature of what's going on out there. And I focus on expansion and renewals for our company. And so, I've gone from all my offensive plans that I had for this year have completely been straight to, defensive with procurement. Every procurement department, even if they're a good customer and they want to renew, everyone's analyzing every single dollar, even if they're not impacted. So it's, it's very defensive. But to kind of answer the question, what's the new normal? In a leadership position, when I look at the team and they're asking the same things, it's like, as a company, I can't just say, well, our revenue goals, our growth goals, all these things, let's just kind of brush it aside. Like, we can do that for a period of time, but for how long can you take your existing team, your existing costs and budgets and everything and say, well, it's the new normal, let's lower the expectations of what you need to do to still get your numbers and your pay. That you can do that for 3 months, 6 months, whatever your company set up can do, you can do that, right? But it's not a long-term strategy, because eventually it starts leading to the new normal, then becomes layoffs and this and that. So it's about, thinking, okay, what are you going to do? So like right now, we're looking at some losses this year, and it hurts. My meetings right now are no fun, but our 21 planning is not about small incremental changes. It's okay, what drastic changes can we do? Let's try to capitalize where others are failing right now. We're in it's a hard position, but we're in a position where we can grow if we really want to invest. And so the new normal, I don't think it can be a matter of let's accept some defeat and let's lower our team's expectations and say your revenue expectations are dropped by 20% going forward. I don't know how long the company can sustain new normal with existing costs, I guess my point. So as a leader, you got to find a way to say, we're here for, we understand it's going to be harder, but we can't accept defeat, because if we do that, where's the company going to be? So that's my 2 cents, and it's easier said than done, I guess. So.
Yeah, great point. And as people are, if anyone else has thoughts on this, please raise your hand and add. I'll say for our company, we did have to unfortunately do some layoffs in the customer success team when all of this hit. And as a result, we also migrated to a lot more self-service tech touch model. And we did not have quality documentation at that time. We didn't really have all the infrastructure required to really support customers on this model. So I think while we simultaneously adjusted, we also transitioned a lot of success metrics toward, self-service and tech touch, and things like tracking where customers are spending time on documentation. Are they coming to us for questions that using the knowledge base? Kind of transitioning a little more toward actually analyzing and evaluating where customers are spending their time and how they're finding answers from our team versus how they did prior to this, to this economic change.
Yeah, that's a great example.
David, to you.
Yeah, I think there's a dichotomy out there right now, right? Customers are really focused on keeping their businesses up and running and they're in survival mode, which means that our ability to engage with them has probably diminished quite a bit. But that doesn't mean that they don't have greater needs than they've ever had before. And in a normal world, that level of engagement would normally go up. And that would mean more requirements and more ways to measure and more conversations and things like that. And I think that's a challenge for a lot of companies. We're dealing with less resources for customers that have greater needs but can't talk to us as frequently, right? So that's a great point. Yeah, and that may create a whole different way for us to figure out what our engagement models look like.
Anyone else have an engagement model you're using right now that you think would be relevant for the group to hear about? Alex.
Yeah, again, we tried to tier our models, so it's like a 1A, 1B, 2A, 2B, and really that's based on the amount of usage. We use Churn Zero to help with health scores, and so wherever they fall.
What do you mean by 1A, 2B? I should probably know that, but.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. So it's broken up by ARR and then the health score of a customer. So if they're, let's just say 10 grand annually or up and have a positive health score, they'll fall into like a 1A, which is a more personalized touch. And then the lower end kind of lagging customers, maybe they're paying us $2,500 a year or something along those lines. That's a lot more automated. I think that definitely allows for customers to kind of fall through the cracks. So I'd be interested to hear any other, kind of engagement touches or cadences that other people use.
Jeffrey.
Yeah, hi. I for the engagement touches, because of so I lead a CS team at Wibit, small platform, definitely more in the SMB world, is what I've recently started using is Intercom for chatting customers where they are, and that's been actually really great to meet them where they are as another way of touch pointing, and then starting to use it for customer interviews. But I think that also helps us understand, like, if they're willing to talk to us, we can get the health of them, understand what they need, and make their experience better. But it's also taking away the need for our CSMs to spend time chasing people, and the people who are engaged will engage with us. So again, it's just another engagement model to figure out how we can communicate with our customers, especially now, like, I forget who mentioned it, but there's not as much time available for our customers as there used to be.
So Jeffrey, what does that chat functionality look like with the customer? Are you also using that for support?
Yeah, so it's actually our main support channel. Like, if you reach out, so if you're in the tool, you can go to the chat and like reach out, but we actually can present a chat to you. So there's multiple ways of it showing. You can show, like, interrupt their full experience, which I don't do, or you can show a snippet of it. But mostly been targeting power users to test it out first. And try to elicit feedback. But it's definitely an avenue we're going to start using more and more to just in general engage with customers. Our CSMs actually use it as a way if a customer is not responding to us over email or LinkedIn, especially the ones who have gone dark. Anytime a new user comes into the platform, they're using the chat to communicate with customers.
Interesting. So is your model, your structure at the company, you have CSMs separated from support, or are your CSMs involved in the support for all customers?
Yeah, they're involved in the support more for like the high level type stuff. We really don't have we're a startup, so we don't have a built out support team, but we want to work towards them not having to be in support, but they currently are.
Thanks for the feedback. Karthik, you've had your hand raised.
I work for Incent.ai, and we are running a B2B SaaS product for the mid-market segment. And the way we are engaging with our customers is we keep running 90-day programs where there are multiple touch points with customers, and we kind of have a bi-weekly or a monthly review on the product data. So that kind of gives the customers more points to look forward to and stay engaged on a regular basis.
Perfect. Thanks so much. And Benny, you had your hand raised as well.
Oh no, I was actually just doing a high five to the idea of the chat. Well, I have an example here. I'm looking for a job, and having to deal with the unemployment and trying to get additional upskilling and so forth. So the last time I went through this, I had to go to the unemployment line, stand in a long line, wait to fill out some form to talk to some associate, that was there that wasn't necessarily motivated to talk to me, just really was motivated to get the line crunched down and so forth. So I went online and I said, how do you get even engaged with unemployment people? And I clicked on a chat session and got an immediate response. And the person I chatted with was very helpful, sent me some forms, got me moving. And what normally took me a full day darn near and maybe several days in a long process went considerably fast. And from a customer experience standpoint, it went dramatically better. I'm glad the office is closed. Now they have to kind of reinvent themselves and engage with customers looking for opportunities in a different way. It's better, faster, and much appreciated. Real-time example there.
Yeah, thank you. That's kind of, the engagement model around remote and what's that done for all companies. I mean, I think that's an interesting discussion point if people want to add more color to that. I do want to move to Kathleen's question since we've got about 5-6 minutes left, I think, before we're pulled back into the main room. And Kathleen had asked, how do you introduce new team members? Is it based on region or skill? And I think that's related to new customers, but also for existing customers, like transitioning. And let's say you realize you want to shift things around. What's that introduction look like, and how do you do that handoff? Anyone have thoughts on that from your current model? And Kathleen, feel free to add color to the question if I didn't quite capture it. Jeffrey, thank you.
Yeah, I'm happy to share. I mean, I look at it whenever I pass over customers, it's skill level and experience for what they need. I mean, we have different products. So like some are more technical and some are very more simplistic. So I always look at what's the skill level of the person that's joining and what customers can I give to them first. And then I try to do it in waves, like in terms of percentage, so that they don't get overwhelmed with, like, say 30 accounts in their first week that they take on customers. Do it in a systematic approach as well.
Meaning that you would give that new CSM only a few customers and eventually you'd ramp them up to the full load.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe like say they're going to get 50 customers total. First week they get 10, next week they get 15. By the third week they're closer to 40 and then get the last 10. And ideally we do it based on like if there's already recurring meetings, based on, I mean, I also look at when you're assigning new accounts based on when renewals are, especially if you're passing over existing customers to a new CSM, because you don't want to disrupt the renewal process, obviously.
Absolutely. And it looks like there's some good stuff happening in the chat. So normally we have an associate facilitator monitoring that. But Paul, I see you asked a question around territory planning. Can you come off mute and kind of talk a little bit more about this question?
Yeah. I was, this is kind of a newer topic for me, so I'm really interested in everybody's opinions and lessons they've learned. But essentially, things have changed quite a bit in the last 6 months. I think that's relatively obvious. But I was wondering, how did your territory plan change from the beginning of the year to now? What are you adopting to? How are you making sure that nothing gets left through the cracks, and you could either grow or you could adopt to maybe massive layoffs?
Thanks, Paul. So thinking about the change from pre-COVID really to now, and how people have thought about their territory planning and customer segmentation. Let's start with Parker.
Hey folks. So I guess I have two thoughts on that. One is I actually resisted the urge to mix things up with COVID. I think continuity and the role that the CSM plays in continuity is so critical. So, where our sales team got a little mixed up and, had some layoffs and things of that nature, having that established relationship, I think, was just paramount. So really tried to resist the temptation to really mix things up. The other thing that we did look at, though, was taking responsibilities off of their plate, because I think it was mentioned earlier how much more bandwidth it takes to just have basic conversations. So trying to find ways to delegate out administrative responsibilities, research, anything that takes them off the phone. really helped to drive a lot of efficiencies for us. So it was more trying to maximize their output, if you will.
That's interesting. Wait, maybe you can talk just a little bit more about that. So Parker, you're saying your CSMs spend most of their day on the phone talking to the customers.
Yes.
Are they using any tools to kind of understand the health of the customer, or how if they're not doing the research or that stuff's being outsourced, what do they do to understand the health of the customer?
Yeah, a couple things. So one is multi-channel. So we doubled down on our survey efforts to try to highlight areas of risk. We spun up a community, got customers involved in chatting. So also taking a look at their interactions there. And then we also spun up a health score, which is something we hadn't had previously. So that was also work in progress, but that's helping to drive focus to where it's needed.
Nice. And Ben, did you have some thoughts to add here?
Yeah, we didn't make a ton of changes either, but I like what you said when you guys were basically forced to go into more tech touch in some areas. I think that's something, if any of us haven't had to do that yet, it makes sense to just force some practice and maybe take some customers and put them into that bucket now, because it just does give you a level of flexibility. And so I think it creates, a parachute where it's like, okay, look, we have to do more tech touch to save some of our larger accounts, or we've lost some team members. So that comment really stuck with me, because we're trying to, but it's like, well, we really need to force it, because it just does give you, whether you're forced into it or you want to grow in other areas, having tech touch already set up, even if it's not like your main strategy, I mean, that really does give you opportunity. So I just like what you said there in terms of that, but we didn't do a ton of changes with our territories.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, kind of two schools of thought, and it probably depends a lot on what type of company you have and how you were affected by the recent impact. But yeah, for us, Tech Touch was the only option, and our customers definitely would have preferred the consistent experience. We would have loved to provide that. But at the same time, it works for our SaaS model and where we're at. I mean, Parker, what kind of company are you in? Is it a SaaS model? Are you doing high touch with all customers, or are you segmenting where some customers are more of a tech touch model?
Yeah, really great question. We actually have a very broad customer base. So we deal with large enterprise, a lot of manufacturers. So everything from the big brands out there that you know and love in your daily life to small 10-person company. So segmentation was critical, absolutely. Like really getting really religious about our engagement model, who we wanted to prioritize. And I think a lot of effort we had to go into making sure that we were touching the right customers or the prioritized customers, and then giving the other customers an opportunity to raise their hand and grab our attention, I guess. So it was a little bit of a push and a pull mechanism there.
Got it. And Joe?
Yeah, on this, there's two things I wanted to add. This has all been really helpful. A couple things I want to do right away based on what people are saying. We also removed our 90-day renewal reminder trigger from Gainsight, and we just actually started all renewal strategies immediately, even if they were in the last day of the fiscal year. And then that immediately triggered us to develop better, I don't want to call it objection handling, but enablement on approaches to help customers with pricing pressure or cost pressure, because we immediately started to get those questions. And then the final thing, and Parker, I love a lot of what you're saying. We tried to remove stuff off of people's plates that was not high impact. But one of the additional reasons we did it was to create some capacity to focus on, for example, pharma customers, because we knew pharma was trying to go faster, and our SaaS product helps IT shops kind of deliver faster with integrations. So we tried to introduce some capacity that they could then reposition at their pharmaceutical customers. So similar mindset.
So are your CSMs, Joe, they're negotiating pricing as well, right? The structure of your company, they're kind of handling expansion and upsell, and now they're looking at those conversations much earlier and considering if there's pain points or potential churn risk before your normal 90-day strategy.
The only nuance would be is my team doesn't talk dollars or commercials or contracts, but I really want them to have a strong point of view on how we should approach the renewal. So lead with our point of view that the customer is getting value and they're healthy, but oh, by the way, their sector was crushed from COVID. So we shouldn't engage them 30 days before their renewal, because they're probably going to want to talk about maybe cost. So let's start to have CS lead a point of view on the renewal strategy, partner with sales on how to deliver that to the customer. But we try not to talk dollars. We try to maintain that objective where your advisor and your friend.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. That would be the internal championing as well. It's like now you're representing the customer 360 and and looking out for them on the sales cycle. That's great.
Yeah.
Would love to hear from maybe Amanda. Any thoughts on kind of anything you've heard so far, and anything you think about territory planning?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, again, I echo this is a great session and a really exciting conversation. A few things that have been said that I thought really resonated with me. Parker, you mentioned about taking non-value driven tasks, is how I phrase it with the CSMs, off their plate. So immediately after COVID hit, I went to work and just created several new playbooks and several new customer success plans in Gainsight, and helped automate a lot of that, firing of tasks and firing of activities for them, so they didn't have the manual work of having to do that. And also went through and overhauled our tech touch strategy with our tech touch clients. We have a pretty broad scope in regard to segmentation of clients as well. So we have really small, 5-person firms we work with all the way up to large global organizations. How we tend to segment our CSMs is first by ARR, because our largest of large organizations are global. So they're meeting with different parts of the organization globally, and they can really segment by region. But in our mid-touch segment, where they are more localized, we do try to segment by region, just for the benefit of our CSMs. So they're not taking a call in Australia and then a call in Singapore and then a call in the US, all in like a 48-hour time frame. That kind of messes with their sleep schedule a bit. So try to be kind that way with the more localized companies. In regard to COVID, though, I didn't really make any other massive shifts, just trying to maintain relationships and maintain a little bit of stable experience for our CSMs as well. The other big shift I made, though, was helping to guide the CSMs in how they communicate with clients, because we have a lot of clients that are experiencing layoffs and are experiencing massive downsizing. And so moving the conversation from how do we expand usage, how do we expand your value, to how do I enable you to be successful today? How do I take work off your plate? How do I allow you to leverage our platform more fully to make your lives easier and make tomorrow possible for you? So that's kind of just been a conversational shift they're working toward having.
Yeah, that's a great point. Kind of making sure that the way we've communicated is appropriate for the situation and the customers feel supported. Yeah. Absolutely. I did notice in the chat, Scott Morgan, you mentioned that you're working with your sales team and looking at strategic accounts and renewals. Can you come off mute and maybe share a little bit more about what you're working on?
Sure. So we looked at how we were working. So before COVID, we were working more of kind of the accounts that we felt that really needed a touch of somebody to focus on them. Wasn't really strategic aligned with sales or aligned at all with sales. And noticing the impact that COVID was having on the world, we thought, well, we better be aligned with our sales. And because we have a small team where we are understaffed, that we want to make sure that we are talking to the companies that sales think are strategic. So we readjusted the accounts across our CSMs and focused on strategic accounts. Once we did that, got all those accounts assigned, then we worked on the renewal process. So we said, okay, any renewal that is going to be in the next 180 days, let's start our renewal strategies there and on those accounts, so that we can know of any pain points before our 90 or 120 normal calls to renewal.
So you also kind of expanded from the 90 to more of a 180 or a longer look at the renewal cycle.
Yeah, and then we offered various payment plans and worked with the customers that were having financial troubles so that we could maintain that relationship and function more as a partner. So that helped us keep the accounts, and also we've been able to have a lower churn rate than last year. So our churn rate has improved over even last year. So that's good news.
That is good news. Yeah, fantastic.
Well, looks like everyone, 40 seconds.
Yeah, thanks so much. I feel like it makes sense to go to the main room rather than say anything else. Thank you for your time. I'll see you in the main room, and I'll try to recap some of this discussion.
Jim, did you finish that smoothie?
Yes, I did. There we go. Lunch is done.
Quick and easy. I like it. Awesome. Looks like we're getting everybody back here. Cool. A couple more come in. Good to see everybody. Hopefully you're having a good day. It's raining. We just skirted a hurricane down here in Charleston. It's raining. It is actually welcome rain though, because it has been hot and humid. Perfect. All right. Let's go ahead maybe and start with Kelly, if you don't mind. Kelly, if you come off mute and maybe just tell us a little bit about what you heard in your room as people were talking about, the topic of CSM territory planning, how they're going through that process, the considerations they're thinking about, and how they're kind of coming to some of the decisions. What'd you find interesting in your room today?
Yeah, absolutely. It was a lot of great discussion, and I'm excited to do a little more in-depth recap for everyone. But some things that really stood out, Joe mentioned, and Joe, your last name, I don't see you on the screen now, but I think it was Joe Mitchell. Joe mentioned that he has a strategy he's employed called the Wolf Pack, which I thought kind of stood out, where rather than approaching CS as kind of a silo from sales like he was previously, where maybe one AE would actually have multiple CSMs they're working with all the time. Since COVID, he's shifted that strategy to be one AE, one CS rep, and they're more of a wolf pack team tackling accounts together. And that was a big impact on how they thought about territory, rather than, being pulled into a bunch of meetings. It's much more of a cohesive plan. Also great thoughts from Parker, who talked about, from his perspective, he really wanted to maintain consistency a little more with his customers if he was able, when COVID hit, and rather than do any big territory shifts or big shifts for them, really think about how could he have his team be a stability and piece of consistency there. So lots of good thoughts from everyone. Amanda mentioned about how she sort of shifted to client communication and the importance of rather than just thinking about territory splitting and all that, but right now, how are CSMs actually communicating to all of their customers and clients, and making sure that we're meeting them where they are and understanding and being empathetic of their situations. So those are some standout comments that I have in my notes, but lots of great discussion to recap later.
Awesome. Joe, I like the Wolfpack idea. Love the name. Hopefully people get behind that too in the organization. And actually can kind of buy into that, create maybe Wolfpack teams, create their own team names. I don't know. You can start maybe playing that up. That's cool. Awesome. Emily, why don't you, if you don't mind coming off mute, maybe doing the same thing, give us a little of what you heard in your room and some of the key points that stood out to you.
Yeah, actually a lot of good discussion.